Since Disney's acquisition of Lucasfilm, the Star Wars franchise has expanded from George Lucas's original 6 films into a multi-platform universe comprised of movies, books, comics, video games, and of course, TV shows. However, the reception to the Disney Star Wars era has been mixed. Some like it, while others not so much. That being said, one show that I do think is really underrated is the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. Now, I have heard the criticisms of this show, and I just want to make this clear from the get-go. This review is not an attack on people who have those criticisms or just don't like the show. This is just me making my case for why I personally really like it. Although, to begin with, I will discuss my own criticisms with the show. One of the things that has impressed me the most about shows like The Mandalorian is the volume. The revolutionary visual effects technology from Industrial Light and Magic designed to allow virtual sets to be filmed on camera in real time. But while this technology was a major benefit to The Mandalorian, its use in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show proves to be a limitation. Whereas the volume effectively maintained the illusion that Din Djarin and co were amidst sprawling environments, in Obi-Wan Kenobi, the environments feel like small, confined spaces, and don't come across as expansive as they should. The worst example of this would be in episode 5 when Darth Vader and the Third Sister send an army of stormtroopers to attack the Path stronghold. I don't buy Vader sending such a small number of stormtroopers to attack a stronghold housing Obi-Wan Kenobi, someone who he has hunted for years at this point, but the volume's size limits the amount of stormtroopers they can have on the set, so the issue was kind of unavoidable. There are other places where you can feel the budgetary limitations, such as the makeup. Despite very capable performances from Rupert Friend and Sung Kang as the Grand Inquisitor and Fifth Brother respectively, the makeup doesn't do either character justice, and neither look anywhere near as good as they did in their animated appearances. Outside of the pretty awesome lightsaber fights, the action can be entertaining, but very few of the action sequences stick out creatively from a filmmaking perspective, and at times they do suffer from some pretty bad choreography and sloppy direction. There are a lot of shots where the effects just don't hold up that well, and it can be pretty distracting. And finally, despite loving her work on the Marvel Disney Plus show Loki, I sadly found the score from Natalie Holt and William Ross pretty underwhelming. Outside of the show's great theme from John Williams, the score is generic and forgettable. With all that said, what makes this show are its writing and characters, and I feel that these elements are at their best in the show's interpretations of Obi-Wan Kenobi himself and Darth Vader. The story of Obi-Wan Kenobi going from a broken man who has lost everything and back to his true self is something that the show absolutely nails. In every episode, we see a different phase of the character. In episode 1, we see someone who has basically given up on everything except his mission to protect Luke Skywalker. He resists the urge to help his co-workers stand up to a horrible boss who's clearly taking advantage of them, and he won't even help a fellow Jedi hide from the Inquisitors, resulting in their death later on. I think it was a very interesting choice to have Obi-Wan's disconnection from the Force tie in with his personal journey, as early on he tries and fails to connect with his deceased master Qui-Gon. It adds another layer to just how broken and defeated this character is, and I really appreciate that this show went as far as it could in making Obi-Wan feel the weight of his failure with Anakin Skywalker. Speaking of which, I adore Obi-Wan's absolute horror at seeing what Anakin has become. While it is a stretch that Obi-Wan went 10 years without hearing the name Darth Vader, I'm nonetheless glad we got to see Obi-Wan react to this because it makes the emotional impact of his reunion with Anakin hit hard. The first time we see Obi-Wan actually ignite his lightsaber is not out of courage but out of fear. Fear of Darth Vader, and that idea makes their first confrontation work because Obi-Wan is basically running away from Vader, and as such Vader easily defeats him, and the terror that Obi-Wan experiences in this encounter is extremely palpable. But what works so well about this show is that every episode pushes Obi-Wan a little further towards becoming the Jedi Master he once was. In episode 4, we finally get to see Obi-Wan once again don the robes of a Jedi as he embarks on a rescue mission to save Leia. Following that, in episode 5, he once again dons the cloak of a Jedi and he becomes a leader, inspiring the members of the Path to stand against the Empire to defend their people. So we get to see Obi-Wan reform himself piece by piece. His growth is very effectively juxtaposed to Vader's lack of growth, who spends the entire episode trying to brute force his way into the Path stronghold, thinking he can win just through power alone, but he is continuously proven wrong by Obi-Wan, who finds alternatives to fighting. Kenobi taking advantage of Vader and Reva's self-interests is a great way to show this because Vader has his sights set on Obi-Wan, while Reva has her sights set on Vader, and Obi-Wan uses that to turn them against each other. Reva lets Obi-Wan go after capturing him because he tells her he's bringing Vader to her so she can kill him, allowing Obi-Wan and the Path enough time to enact their plan, and when Vader attempts to grab around a ship that he thinks houses Obi-Wan and a path, his lust for revenge blinds him to the very obvious second ship, which then escapes with Obi-Wan and the path safely aboard. It's fantastic writing that shows Obi-Wan's growth and how single-minded and blinded Vader has become. Obi-Wan taking on Vader so the path can escape is so moving because he does it compassionately. It works thematically because Obi-Wan recognizes that the path are the future and the importance of their survival. There are plenty of amazing moments in Obi-Wan and Vader's duel, but the most significant for me is easily Obi-Wan literally being buried by Vader and then digging himself out of that hole. It movingly symbolizes Kenobi overcoming his past, setting himself free and reconnecting with the Force. Moving on to Darth Vader, what they do with him in this show is awesome. His introduction is absolutely horrifying as he wanders through a street murdering innocent people trying to draw Obi-Wan out of hiding, after which he stalks Obi-Wan like a horror movie villain, hiding in the shadows and seemingly bursting from out of nowhere to strike him down. And as if beating Obi-Wan wasn't enough, Vader literally drags him through fire just to make him suffer, directly paralleling Anakin being burned alive in Revenge of the Sith when he and Obi-Wan last met. A jaw-dropping yet chill-inducing introduction that conveys just how consumed by vengeance Vader is. This show reveals the unhinged side of Darth Vader that we haven't seen before. The scene in episode 4 where he attacks Reva is particularly intense because Vader is so rageful that his hand is literally shaking as he force chokes the Inquisitor. While the franchise has gone a long way in establishing that fear, anger, and hate are what drive most darkside characters, this is a new side to Darth Vader that makes him more intimidating. Vader doesn't really have an arc or any sort of growth in this show, but I'd argue that's rather brilliant. He isn't as calculating as he is in A New Hope. He's an attack dog driven completely by rage, and naturally that causes him problems. The flashback sequences in episode 5 perfectly demonstrate Vader's complete lack of growth. Throughout the episode, both Obi-Wan and Vader revisit the same event, but whereas Obi-Wan revisits this event to inform his decisions in the present, Vader is still dealing with the same issues, which is a great way to show just how little he's changed. Despite wishing we'd seen far more of him, I loved everything we got from Hayden Christensen, even though he only had one scene to shine as Anakin. Vader's entire character is best summed up in the conclusion to Obi-Wan and Vader's duel in the finale. He spends the entire series blaming Obi-Wan for what he became, but when Obi-Wan apologizes to him, Vader changes his tune and claims he killed Anakin Skywalker, a statement which, judging by his smirk, is something Vader probably thought was really cool, but then Obi-Wan accepts that and leaves Vader alone. The scene illustrates the misery and isolation of Vader's existence, as he is literally looking for reasons to be angry at Obi-Wan. And that's great writing, I don't know what else to tell you. It also serves as the conclusion to Obi-Wan's arc. His attempts to reach out to Anakin after defeating Vader is heartbreaking because Obi-Wan apologizes to Anakin for all his failures, but despite it deeply hurting Obi-Wan to hear Vader's retort, Obi-Wan accepts that the friend he once knew is no more and is able to gain closure. Obi-Wan's arc going from hiding in a cave to overcoming his failures is for me one of the most powerful stories in the Star Wars saga, and Ewan McGregor absolutely crushes it in the role, delivering my favorite performance as the character. Yes, it is true that the imagery of Vader's sliced open helmet is identical to when it happened in Ahsoka and Vader's duel in Star Wars Rebels, but I'm actually okay with it here because I like the idea that Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, the two surviving prequel era characters that are closest to Anakin, truly saw what he became after he fell to the dark side. I also think the way this show ties to A New Hope is very clever. For example, Obi-Wan calls Anakin Darth because he no longer sees this person as Anakin Skywalker, which explains why Obi-Wan referred to him as such in A New Hope, and I would even say it makes that line more powerful. The other characters in the show are great as well. Vivian Lyra Blair as a young Leia is a lot of fun. I was one of the many that were skeptical about Obi-Wan leaving Luke on Tatooine to go on some sort of adventure, but Leia's inclusion makes that choice make sense, and Obi-Wan and Leia are a wonderful pairing. All their interactions are gold. Moments like Obi-Wan telling Leia not to touch or smell anything, as well as Leia making him buy her gloves despite his objections, are really funny. But what makes their dynamic so touching is the moments of happiness Leia sparks within Obi-Wan. One of their best scenes is when Obi-Wan tells Leia about the Force, a very small interaction in the grand scheme of things, sure, but I love the smile that Obi-Wan gives Leia. He's so broken and depressed in these early episodes that I can't help but feel happy for him whenever he even cracks a smile. Although the scenes where Obi-Wan tells Leia about her parents are deeply deeply moving, particularly if you're a fan. I love the moment where Obi-Wan tells Leia she has her mother's face, and the conversation about longing for their real families really tugs at the heartstrings, as does their final interaction where Obi-Wan tells Leia about her real parents. It is just so heartwarming getting to see Obi-Wan form a connection with the daughter of his fallen friend. Their relationship also has another great connection to the original trilogy. The moment where Obi-Wan tells Leia she has already repaid him parallels Anakin telling Luke he's already saved him in Return of the Jedi, and I genuinely love that both Skywalker kids helped a Jedi from the previous era find themselves when they became lost. Speaking of which, this show brings the Inquisitors into live action, who are a group of dark side Force users trained to hunt Jedi. The Inquisitors do feature quite prominently in the show and don't really do much, but I do think their scenes are impactful enough. I particularly like the Grand Inquisitor's monologue about how Jedi basically hunt themselves because they refuse to let go of compassion, which connects really well to the show's themes and juxtaposes Obi-Wan, who spends much of the early episodes giving up his compassion. I also have to say Rupert Friend's performance as the Grand Inquisitor is great because it adds so much to the character. He's suitably over the top, menacing, and he's even kind of sassy, which makes for some great line readings and even a few good laughs. However, it's Moses Ingram's Reva, aka the Third Sister, that shines brighter. The line in Revenge of the Sith where Obi-Wan tells Anakin he has become the very thing he swore to destroy sums Reva up perfectly. While it's technically not confirmed until episode 5, Reva's story beginning as a youngling on the eve of Order 66 is a great way to not only begin the show, but to introduce the character, as she and the younglings are seen training peacefully in silent serenity, only for that peace to come to a traumatically quick end. It gives Reva's discovery of the path emotional weight because in that moment she realizes she could have been rescued, but is now trapped and condemned to serve the Empire as an Inquisitor. But what makes this character so intriguing is that she is an Inquisitor that is hunting Vader. An Inquisitor climbing the ranks just so she can exact vengeance on Vader is such a good idea. Naturally, with this being a prequel to the original trilogy, we know this doesn't go so well for her, which does make her overall arc feel a little predictable, but even so, I like that Reva's desire for revenge is ultimately her undoing. She essentially becomes the very thing she swore to destroy, trying to inflict the same horrors inflicted on her by Vader on another group of Force-sensitive families. I love her duel with Vader not just because it's a pretty great action scene, but also because despite using every trick at her disposal, Vader easily defeats her, and all the terrible things she did for the Empire, the planning and plotting against Vader gets her nowhere, and she finds herself right back where her story began, mortally wounded and on the brink of death, bringing her arc tragically full circle. I also loved seeing the Fortress Inquisitorius in live action. It was a great level in the game Jedi Fallen Order, and its use in the show is great. The best scene to come from its inclusion was easily Obi-Wan discovering the tomb filled with the dead Jedi the Inquisitors have hunted over the years. However, its inclusion does make it a little frustrating that we didn't get to see more of the Inquisitors actually hunting Jedi outside of Reva gunning for Obi-Wan, because I think more screen time with them could have made them appear more threatening. But I do like what we get to see of their group dynamic. I like that they're so concerned with credibility and power that they just can't work together, resulting in Obi-Wan and co managing to escape them multiple times. Do they look kinda stupid because of that? Yeah, but it does make them interesting characters, so I'll take it. On the flip side, I really like the path. The idea of a secret network of safe houses and lifeboats for Force sensitives is very cool, and characters like Tala and Roken rubbing off on Obi-Wan is compelling because they're characters who show compassion by risking their lives to help those in need. I especially like the character Tala, who when working with the Empire was responsible for the deaths of multiple families. Her guilt parallels Obi-Wan's own guilt for his failures, but unlike Obi-Wan initially, she chooses to fight so that others don't share the same fate. While she has minimal screen time, I like that she, as well as Leia, brings out the best in Obi-Wan and inspires him to do more for others, which helps him reform back into the Jedi Master he once was. The Obi-Wan Kenobi show is by no means flawless, but I do think it is a worthy addition to the Star Wars saga and a much more powerful story than it's given credit for. While there are elements of this show's production that I think could have been executed better, I do strongly feel that this show's writing and characters more than make up for it, and it's because of that this is an installment I actually revisit fairly often. I personally don't understand why the show gets as much hate as it does. I do think a lot of it is a little too harsh and perhaps even undeserved, but at the same time, I get it if the show's just not for you. For me though, the Obi-Wan Kenobi series is one of the better shows in Disney Plus's catalogue, and honestly one of my favourite Star Wars stories.